What's up, everybody? Matt Maran here for another weekly update. So there's lots of exciting news to go over here this week, but before I get into the news, I first want to mention I'll be doing my usual weekly live stream on Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time, so join if you can. It's always a fun time hanging out and talking cars with all of you. Also, arguably the biggest news this week is the potential of tariffs still next week. I will cover that at the end, so feel free to click away if that stuff upsets you, but it is important, so I will be talking about that at the end. But getting into the other important news here this week, first, Mopar Insiders here has a new report out this week claiming that their sources say that Dodge will move production of the HEMI V8 lineup from its former location in Mexico to Michigan here very soon, and that they're targeting an August production start. So really quickly there, and the factory will supposedly build the 5.7 liter HEMI V8, the 6.4 liter, and also the supercharged 6.2 liter Hellcat. So all of them are coming back supposedly, and they say even in the future there's a potential for a larger displacement HEMI that could arrive sometime in the future, because why not go out with the biggest bang possible, I suppose, for this 4-year return tour for the V8s. And so it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing with that. But as long as hopefully those V8 buyers don't mind their cars costing 25% more, which again, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But as for the engines here, Mopar Insider says it'll still be the same Gen 3 design, although it could get some updates or enhancements, they say. But don't expect, any new generation of this engine with any real big changes. I think, most people are fine with that, though. They just want to see the engine return. Doesn't matter if, it's doing the same kind of number as it did in the past, I think. So, as far as what will get the V8s, obviously the trucks are the logical thing. It'll be, mostly, I think, for Ram. The one Dodge engineer did tell me to my face at the Charger launch that the V8s don't fit in the new Charger. He could be lying to me. It could be, a technicality that maybe they found a way to make something else work. I don't know. But, I wouldn't hold your breath still for a V8 Charger. That could, of course, change. We'll see what happens. Maybe they'll do some giant blower hood where they just stuff the engine in there and it is what it is. I don't know. But, we'll see what happens there. But I still don't think you should get your hopes up for a V8 Charger just yet. But anyway, none of this stuff in this report is official yet either, so that's worth noting. Mopar Insiders is pretty reliable, so I'm inclined to believe this, but, we will just have to wait and see if Dodge does have an announcement. I'm sure if they do bring production of something from Mexico to the U.S., they will very loudly trumpet that, because that is certainly something that, is, going to be favorable with the administration right now. So hopefully, they do give us some kind of confirmation soon if that is in fact happening. For some disappointing news for fans of V8s, though, GM Authority has a new report here this week claiming that their sources familiar with the matter say that Cadillac has no plans for any new gas-powered sedans, and that Cadillac is planning to replace the CT4 and the CT5 with 2 electric sedans, one that's a similar size to the CT5 and another one that's larger, around the size of the old CT6, so kind of, moving up market a little bit with that instead. And they say they'll have similar styling to the Celestiq, including possibly the sportback practicality you see with Celestiq. The hatch thing makes a ton of sense. We saw, Audi do this with the new A5 sedan, which is the A4 that, they now have the hatchback thing on that. And I think it makes a ton of sense to include that. So as far as how this is all going to play out too with the smaller one, back in November, the Wall Street Journal, I missed this somehow. They captured what looks like a new electric Cadillac sedan when they toured the GM Tech Center, and that one looks basically like a sedan version of the Optic. So that one, doesn't seem to have any kind of real Celestiq-inspired design, but there's a chance that maybe the CT5 replacement here is this Optic-looking one, and then we have, a larger, grander one that's kind of just like a shrunken-down Celestiq. We'll have to see. But anyway, they'll all supposedly be built on an evolved version of the Ultium BEV3 platform called BEV Prime, that this evolution will provide a lower hip point as well as other, obvious enhancements. But the lower hip point allows it to be sportier, allows it to, again, cater to sedans. And the report doesn't say when these sedans will arrive, but based on how finished that one looks that we, again, saw back in November there, I'm guessing at least one of these could debut even later this year. Again, that one in that picture looked pretty much done. And it doesn't look super futuristic either, so I would think that this is coming out, shortly after Optic here, which has just launched. So we'll see. But yeah, I don't think Cadillac has said, any kind of timeline for any new products, honestly. So, who knows? But as far as current CT4 and CT5, Cadillac has promised production of them until the 2026 model year, which basically, takes us into next year potentially. So could be lining up for, either a 2027 debut for, that Optic looking sedan, or we could see them sold alongside each other. We see a lot of other companies doing this. It could be that, CT4 and CT5 continue on for a long while, and we have these new electric ones sold alongside it. They will probably get new names anyway, so no conflict there. They'll probably have the IQ kind of names for whatever they end up doing for them. So we'll see how that all plays out, but, I think they could certainly offer these alongside each other and still have CT4 and CT5, for the rest of the decade if they want here, So we'll have to wait and see about all that, but anyway, very interesting to see and hear all that. Ford still appears to be working on a sporty EV, or at least preparing for one potentially someday, with a new patent that Motor One found that Ford published last week that they submitted back in 2023. So it's something that's been going on for a while, but published this week. And it's a shifter assembly for an electric vehicle here. And that patent suggests it'll be more than just a video game shifter as well, with small motors, they say, in the base of it to provide feedback and notchy resistance like a real gearbox. And it has a 6-speed pattern, or it can be turned into a sequential shifter as well. And when you aren't in the mood for it, the whole thing can supposedly be retracted, and there's no mention of pedal arrangement, I don't think, in this patent, so I'm guessing it won't use a clutch like the Lexus Toyota one that they're kind of playing around with, where you can use the clutch, you can also stall it even, and you can do all this, really realistic stuff. This is sounding nice, though, with having the notchy resistance and all that, and be interesting to see, but also, I don't know what Ford's planning on putting this in, because just last year, Ford CEO Jim Farley made this strange comment that we'll never do an electric Mustang, or that we have no plans for an electric Mustang, even though Mach-E is technically a Mustang, according to them. But, aside from that, it doesn't sound like there's going to be any kind of sporty 2-door or 4-door sedan kind of thing, with an electric powertrain. So I don't know why they would need this. I guess maybe someday in the far off distant future. Also, there's a chance maybe if we get an electric Bronco someday, maybe this is meant for that first. And we'll see. You have people who want that manual customization of, gearing out on the trail. You can kind of do that here with the shifter maybe. That's, I think, possibly even a stronger argument than the sporty thing, because with that, you actually have real potential practical uses for, people who don't want to have 100% instant full-blown torque, for those delicate situations off-road. So maybe that's what the plan is for this. We'll have to see. I don't think an electric Bronco's coming anytime this decade either, though. They pushed back and delayed a bunch of their EV projects in order to prioritize, more plug-in hybrids and stuff. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, very interesting to see that. Nissan and their new CEO rolled out the next-gen Leaf partially here this week and gave us pretty clear looks here at what else is coming in the near future for Nissan and for Infiniti as well. So first, we'll start with the Leaf here. So we don't get too much info yet, and we only have them showing off the front end of it so far. So they say more info and pictures will be coming mid-year. But what we do see, though, is, a very much crossover kind of larger vehicle for the Leaf here, which is what we were hearing for a long time. It was going to go to more of a crossover kind of thing. They say it'll be on the same platform as the Aria. They'll be offering 19-inch wheels for the first time on the Leaf, and also a panoramic moonroof on these. And they'll arrive first in the US and Canada this fiscal year, meaning by the fall, I believe, and this North American version will also come with the NACS port for the charging. And then moving beyond the Leaf here, they say we'll see over 10 new and refreshed products in the next 2 years here. So this fiscal year will also bring the debut of the plug-in hybrid version of the Rogue, as well as a next generation of the Sentra that looks pretty promising and a little bigger there. I'm kind of liking that. And there's also going to be a refreshed Pathfinder we can see in the shadows there, and a refreshed QX60, and also finally a new sport package for the QX80. Moving into the next fiscal year here, we'll get an all-new 4th generation of the Rogue, they say, and it'll include their e-Power hybrid tech for the first time here in North America, alongside a regular gas version and the continuation of the plug-in hybrid. And we can see, again, that in the shadows, I believe, as well, and looks pretty cool there. We'll also get a QX65 crossover coupe here in the next fiscal year as well. And then moving into late fiscal year 2027, they say an all-new Nissan EV will begin production in Mississippi, and that it will be a venture-based or adventure-focused SUV for this one. So that one's a little bit of a curveball here. So we'll see if they put the Xterra badge on this. Previous discussions from Nissan executives were that if they were doing an Xterra, they wanted it to be very legitimate, be like, an actual like body on frame kind of thing. But this takes us through the next 3 years, and it sounded like Xterra was maybe a little closer than this, but maybe it's further off for a true Xterra, or they plan on using the Xterra name on this. We'll see. But this roadmap is nice to see, but it also is a little disappointing just because, there still is low-hanging fruit that they're ignoring here. Like, I mean, I don't know how many times I have to say it, but like, why not copy the Tacoma 4Runner formula? Take a Frontier, take the truck bed off the back, put a finished cargo area there, call it Xterra or call it whatever you want, and print money. Especially this is the time when Nissan needs a money printer. They need low cost, low effort stuff that has the best chance for success. And I think that's the kind of thing they need to be doing. I mean, all these other things don't hurt, but how many people are going to be running out and buying a coupe version of the QX60? Versus how many people will be running out and buying, a Frontier that's given the 4Runner treatment. I don't know. We'll see. Obviously, the new CEO has just come in, and all this stuff has been in the works for years, so it might be several years before we actually get any of his influence as far as, what comes beyond this next phase here. But, they're still on the brink of, they're on very hard times here. And I mean, again, the exact specifics of how tight they are, is still kind of up in the air, to the public. But, they very much need big hits that are, high profit, low cost stuff very quickly. And, I'm not sure if any of this stuff's going to radically move the needle. We'll see, but best of luck to them on all of that. But this roadmap does seem to confirm that there is no new Altima coming. We had assumed that, but there had been talks that we were going to get an electric sedan in 2026. Clearly, this shows that that's not happening. With the first new Nissan EV here coming is going to be this SUV thing in late fiscal year 2027. So this means the idea was that probably Maxima will come back as an EV Nissan sedan, and it sounds like that's now pushed to at least 2028. So a good 2-year delay, it seems, for that one potentially. We'll see about everything else. But yeah, it's interesting. Again, really nice of them to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit, let us know what's in the pipeline. But I do hope that there's a few other surprises or a few other things that they're not showing us, because I'm not sure if this is enough to, change their fortunes on their own. But speaking of, being on their own here, Nissan is still considering partnerships here. They said that here this week whenever they did all this, media stuff for this new rollout of, the Leaf and all that. And so speaking of partners, the new CEO here and other Nissan executives revealed their current thoughts on the status of all these merger ideas here. And so their chief performance officer said, "We never stopped talking to Honda." And then their new CEO here said, "We are working every week with Honda because we have a lot of projects with them," referring to the agreement that they made early last year to collaborate on EVs and software. And so that still is continuing here, and that was never one of the conditions of this merger or anything. And so Nissan's new chief planning officer for North America also was pretty open here, saying in regards to Honda, "We're thinking of doing individual programs with them. So just think, I'm using Honda as a hypothetical here because that's a real conversation going on. It's not that any of this has been finalized. But if you do the next generation of our large SUVs, that has to replace a Pathfinder, a Murano, a QX60, and a QX65. 4 vehicles. And those same vehicles have counterparts at Honda. So if you do develop a common platform with them, instead of maybe just 200,000 units, you're immediately developing it for another 200,000 units. You can see how very quickly you can get variable costs under control." They did say, though, that if they can't cut costs enough and boost profitability enough, they still might need a merger. And according to their new CEO, "I have a no taboo approach to partnerships." And he also said that if it could be in many shapes and forms. So I guess we'll see how, again, it all shakes out for them. I think it makes a lot of sense, to do, the heavier stuff there with Honda. And, we'll see if Honda could also benefit from this as well. If, they get a version of the Armada still and all these other things, that could definitely be beneficial in the long-term future. But again, these are all great ideas. We're talking about next-gen Murano. Murano just came out. The last gen lasted 10 years or whatever, So I think these are far-off distant things that are certainly great to hear about here. And I mean, some of them are sooner. The Pathfinder, for example, is up here in the next couple of years probably. But, it's just like, they're talking far off stuff here, and it sounds like Nissan needs help now, like yesterday, not 5-10 years from now. That's all, well and good, but hopefully, again, they find something here that helps to keep them afloat and keeps them in a strong position. So we'll see. I continue to wish them the best of luck, and hopefully, the new leadership and all of that certainly helps too. But moving on here, Hyundai has also teased a coming model, although this one is just a concept here, and a wild one at that, but it's called the Insteroid, it's a combination of Inster, the Hyundai that, they have in their home market that's a very small, affordable little car, and then Steroid. So Insteroid, as I guess what they're going to be calling that little thing. And so we get more info in April, and it looks like a fun idea. And hopefully they do some kind of Inster-N someday, although I'm sure that wouldn't come to the States. But it could be fun, especially that one looks like it's going to be a rally car. It'd be fun to see them, enter it into some kind of rally competition or something. We'll have to see, but if nothing else, a fun concept for video games or whatever. But anyway, cool to see that. And a wild performance car that we got a full reveal of this week is the Volante version of the 2026 Aston Martin Vanquish. So mechanically, it's the same, of course, with its 824 horsepower twin-turbo V12, but the 0 to 62 mile per hour time is 0.2 seconds slower at 3.4 seconds, as if anyone buying these cares. Aston does say that the weight gain for the Volante, though, is minimal, despite it getting chassis reinforcements to make it almost as rigid as the coupe, they say. The suspension also gets a unique tune, so I'm guessing it'll be maybe a little bit softer and accommodate, the extra weight there. And the roof goes down in 14 seconds and up in 16 seconds. It speeds up to 31 miles per hour. Unfortunately, there's no rear seat offered for these still, which I think would be a nice option to offer, like Porsche now does with the GT3 Touring. And especially with this being the softer, less hardcore version, for convertible buyers, I think it would make sense to offer that still. But other than that, I think it looks fantastic. And production begins in the third quarter of this year. And they say less than 1,000 of these are going to be built each year. And there's no pricing for them yet, but it'll likely be around or above $450,000 to start. And so, yeah, glad to see another drop-top V12, one of my favorite types of vehicles. So great to see that. Audi has also revealed a couple plug-in hybrid versions here of the new A5 sedan and Avant this week. And right now this is all European info. We'll see, which of these comes to the States. But for now, there's two versions here. Both use a 2-liter Turbo 4 combined with electric motors and a 25.9 kilowatt-hour usable battery. And they'll do an impressive 68 miles of electric range on the easier WLTP test cycle in Europe. But that still should be good for about 50 miles or so here in EPA testing. And the base one does 295 horsepower, and the faster one does 362 horsepower, which matches the 6-cylinder S5 identically there with the horsepower, although this one is 0.6 seconds slower to 60 or to 62 than the S5, and that's likely due to that extra weight, of course, of the battery pack, and also probably less aggressive suspension and less aggressive transmission tuning, stuff like that. But yeah, we don't have any specific numbers as far as the extra weight, though, so we'll have to see about that. But ordering is open now in Europe for these, with production starting here in April, but there's no word on whether it'll debut in the US, when it'll debut, if it does. But anyway, very cool to see that. In some other Audi news here, their CEO revealed to South German newspaper here this past week that they're going to be doing an A3 size electric vehicle that'll be debuting next year, actually. Kind of came out of left field. I don't think anyone's really expecting a low cost Audi EV, but here we are. And he didn't provide any other info on it other than saying it's going to be built in Germany. But the logical guess here is that it's going to probably be sharing a platform with the other affordable EV in the Volkswagen group that's coming next year, the ID2. Electric Golf would be the prime candidate for an A3 type thing, but that's not coming for several years here still, it sounds like, and won't be in time for Audi to have something here next year. So most likely, Audi's version of the ID2, which sounds great. And it'll be great to see, another new small EV here. And, could undercut even larger stuff like the Mercedes CLA, depending on, how they decide to price it and all that. But of course, being built in Germany, it's unlikely we'll get it here for sure. And I guess we'll have to wait and see. But wouldn't hold your breath for that one, but cool to see that for Europe. And GMC this week has revealed the lower trims of the Sierra EV, and that are going to be coming here for 2026. And they are the Elevation trim and the AT4. They also revealed 2 lower battery packs under the massive Max pack that we had currently here. There's a standard range pack and an extended range pack. So we don't know battery sizes or range estimates for these yet, but these smaller batteries will obviously have less range, but also less cost. And speaking of cost, that's the big improvement here for 2026. And we do have full pricing for these already, thankfully. So the Elevation with the standard range pack now starts at $64,495, which is a huge drop from, the top Denali's were over 100 grand. So I mean, this is a really nice to see, and that price does include destination. And then the extended range battery bumps that price up by about $8,000 to $72,695. And then the AT4 starts with the extended range battery at $81,395 and can jump up 10 grand or so here for the Max battery pack. And lastly, the Denali also even gets a much lower starting price because it too can now be had with the standard and extended range batteries. Now I'm starting at $71,795, going up to 80 grand for that extended range battery, and then strangely jumping $20,000 to go up for the Max battery pack. Not sure why. There's that massive jump for that one when you don't have that with the other, one that gets the Max pack. But anyway, as far as the AT4 version's off-road enhancements, it gets the rear wheel steering system and crab walk mode we saw in the Hummer. There's also 2 extra inches of ground clearance and a 2,000-pound higher tow rating of 12,300 pounds now. And all these 2026s will begin arriving at dealers here this summer. So really great to see, again, those price points coming down, and it's good to see a more affordable alternative now with Cybertrucks falling out of popularity very quickly. It's great to see that we have not only the Silverado EV, but also the GMC version here coming in and undercutting the Cybertruck as well. And the last thing we unfortunately need to talk about here this week are the tariffs. I hate talking about them, but they're very important to consumers who will be, taking the brunt of these tariff costs. And so I'm not going to go too in depth on the tariffs here. I'm going to try and be brief with this because the wording is still ambiguous for a lot of exactly, what they're planning with this. And there's still a lot that just isn't clear. And of course, like we've seen, in the past couple of months here, the whole thing could get scrapped or changed or delayed. Despite Trump did say this week that they're definitely happening and permanent for his whole term. So we'll see about that. But anyway, they're supposedly going to be starting next week on April 3rd. It's still 25%, both for imported cars and for imported parts going into all cars. Meaning, despite him saying if your car is built in the U.S., there are no tariffs, but those vehicles will get tariffs on their foreign parts content eventually here. But there's a lot of caveats, so exactly, it's not going to be a blanket 25%. It's not going to be, any kind of other fixed number. It's going to very much wildly vary by every individual car and every part on each car, and it's just going to be crazy. And because of that, the parts tariff, the parts component of it won't actually start till May 3rd to give them more time, I'm assuming, to figure out this giant headache of calculating, U.S. parts content for all these things. Where do the parts come from? Do they come from Canada or Mexico where they might have preferential treatment? Or are they going to come from other parts of the world where, you will get the full tariff? Well, different countries have different deals and different rates. I don't know how they're going to figure this out, but so we'll see, how this all plays out. But so, each car, it won't just be 25%. It'll be, something different. So he said that, for example, if parts are made in America and a car isn't, those parts are not going to be taxed and will have very strong policing as far as that's concerned. For vehicles built in Canada or Mexico, it sounds like car companies will only pay a tariff on the non-US parts in that vehicle. And even then, one part of the executive order here says that certain parts could get preferential treatment if they aren't a threat to national security. Which could mean anything or nothing, because, that term has been thrown around a lot here recently, very loosely. Aside from the cameras and the sensors and the radars and stuff, I don't understand how any of these other parts could be a threat to national security. I don't think, anyway, so again, this is why this is all kind of ambiguous, and like everyone's like, well, what does that mean? So we'll see. Again, what it gives them a loophole here too, to just kind of say, oh, well, this part isn't a threat, so we're not tariffing it, because apparently the whole reason for these tariffs is national security. And so also towards the end of all these orders and stuff, there's an option to not even tariff at all if the Secretary of Commerce and the President decide that they're no longer necessary. So that right there is just giving them an out if they decide that security is secured now or whatever. So he also mentioned a small potential concession here to car buyers, floating this idea, not confirmed, but floating the idea that car loan interest for American-built cars could be tax deductible if Congress approves of that. But, that's a drop in the bucket compared to the thousands of dollars of price hikes that these vehicles will be hit with. And also, none of this stuff accounts for retaliatory tariffs, which, Canada has already promised, and many others I'm sure will likely follow along with and tack on in one form or another, which will kill export volumes and therefore crush profit margins even more. If we're doing this isolationist thing and you can't export stuff either anymore, then, you lose all the Canadian market, all the Mexican market for a lot of these vehicles, and a lot of these companies depend on those exports. Exports are, hugely important for car companies, and so you're losing that too, and that's going to either mean you're going to have the cost of these cars get driven up additionally, in addition to the tariffs, driven up even more by, that whole component as well. And then not to mention, insurance rates going up because all these parts are more expensive and everything's going to get, very expensive to repair and total and all that. So anyway, that's the whole thing there, and there's a lot of great analysis that has been done online. You can search for more details on this stuff if you want, including my friends at TFL did a new video here kind of analyzing all this stuff here this week. But I'll quickly mention a few notable standouts here that I think are very important to enthusiasts, and especially those of you I think who watch this channel and the kind of cars that I think a lot of you love. So first, Tesla will be the least affected, no surprise there, with the current situation in Washington, but with all U.S. market vehicles for Tesla being built in the US and having 80% or more of domestic content, the price hits for Tesla should be pretty negligible, assuming anyone still actually wants to buy one, which currently seems to be very few people. But it's going to be minor compared to the bloodbath of the rest of the industry here. The Mustang GT also is in a pretty good place, also at 80% domestic content for the automatic version, but the manual transmission comes from Germany, so expect a price premium for manual Mustangs GTs going forward potentially, because those will be more expensive because of that transmission there. Now, the Honda Passport, the Jeep Wrangler, and Volkswagen ID4 are all over 75% domestic content as well. So those, again, will be hurt, but less than, many others, and those are all built in America here as well. The real sad part, though, for enthusiasts is that this is going to hit affordable sports cars the worst. And it's going to, I think, be really devastating for that segment. So the Miata has just 1% domestic content, obviously built in Japan, as same deal for the Subaru BRZ, Toyota GR86, GR Corolla, Hyundai Elantra N, and BMW M3, for example, all 1% or less domestic content. So you hit them with the import, and then also, the parts stuff, if that gets tariffed as well, these are cars that people only buy because they are affordable. I mean, aside from the M3, but all these other ones, it's going to kill them. And so Japan's government is, trying their hardest to lobby against this, with their prime minister here this week saying, Japan is a country that is making the largest amount of investment to the United States, so we wonder if it makes sense for Washington to apply uniform tariffs to all countries. That is a point we've been making and will continue to do so. And I wish them the best of the luck with that. But, if these tariffs do stand and aren't adjusted heavily to accommodate, Japanese and, Korean vehicles, I could see Miata, BRZ, GR86, GR Corolla, Elantra N all leaving the market. Because again, we're talking about tiny volumes here. We're talking about passion projects that, don't make the companies any real money. A lot of them are probably money losers or very close to it. And they're vehicles that already struggle with volumes, already struggle with a business case. And then you tack on, 25% or more tariffs onto these things. They won't stay. These are cars that do not have to be made, that do not have to stick around, do not have to be offered in the US. And I really don't think they will be. It could be actually the death of the affordable sports car. We'll see. Again, anything could change, any hour of any day here with the way things are going. But if this stands, I think we will lose affordable sports cars. So hope you like Mustangs. I guess that's going to be about all you're going to have to choose from here. And so... yeah, that was sucking. I mean, just to illustrate, if they did try to sell these with the tariff, again, assuming it's just the 25%, we're not talking about extra tariffs and retaliatory things hurting it. A Miata would start at $38,000 at least, with top trims cracking $50,000 for a Miata. Same situation for BRZ, GR86, GR Corolla would start at $50,000. Elantra N would start over $44,000 under these, kind of tariffs. And I just don't think anyone's going to buy at these prices. You might see a few people buying, but if BRZs, which were previously the poor man's Cayman, are now approaching Cayman prices, I guess obviously Caymans are going to go up way more as well. But it's going to be tough. I really feel like these cars are going to be the ones that get hurt the most. Because again, they're the most vulnerable already. And then you add on this, huge headwind. Forget it. I don't think they're going to last here. So, of course, the high-end sports cars and their buyers will be completely fine paying 25% more for most of this stuff. They probably pay that extra at the dealer for half of this crap anyway, when we're talking about the exotic stuff. So, I think that's going to be mostly fine. And so, once again, the middle-class buyers that just want to have a fun, affordable little sports car, they're going to be the losers, in this. And so... all these voters thought they were saving car culture, and I hope that, the few revived V8s that are lasting for the next 4 years, I hope you enjoy those at, again, 25% more or whatever. But, I think it's that's going to be the cost that we'll be paying, is we'll be losing all the affordable sports cars, as well as many other vehicles as well. I think you could see Mitsubishi drop off immediately and just say, well, we're just leaving the market because I don't think any of their stuff's built in America. And they're just not going to be competitive. Same thing goes for Mini, another, kind of lower cost kind of thing. I think you could see Mini drop out. No reason to sell here. Very small numbers and just a passion project. And, that's a kind of buyer that's not going to pay 25% more. I think we could see a lot less choices here this year. And especially for the enthusiast, it's going to be used market and that's it. So... yeah, it sucks to say that. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I please hope that I'm wrong. But that's kind of my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. But it's gonna be a lot of whiskey drinking here, I think, this year. If we lose a lot of vehicles, we'll be doing a lot of toasts here, saying goodbye to a lot of awesome cars here in the States. We'll see what happens. But anyway, very interesting to hear that. Lastly, I want to thank all of you that are members of the Maran Motoring Club. So we did have one new member that was able to join, and many others are able to rejoin thanks to the very generous membership gifting done by several members here during last week's live stream. So I want to give a big thank you here to Grand Admiral Thrawn, Carlos Rojas, Kyle. Thank you all so much for your generosity. I really appreciate it. I'm sure all of those, new members and, again, members are able to rejoin also really appreciate it as well. And so I also want to give a big welcome here to the new member, Matt Smith. So I hope you enjoy the membership perks, Matt, and thanks so much for being a fan of the channel here. Looking forward to chatting with you if you can make it to this Sunday's live stream here, where those members always do get that priority answering. If you would also like that priority answering, as well as all the perks that come with being a member, there's always join buttons here on the video page, the channel page, and a link in the description. But anyway, thank you all very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Please leave a like and subscribe to keep these videos coming, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.